the day I discovered my husband was cheating. I didn't cry or make a scene. Instead, he gifted me a luxury car worth tens of millions. His secretary, clearly trying to annoy me, had attached a cheap rhinestone doll to the car key. The young girl was too inexperienced. I didn't get angry. I simply smiled and said, "Honey, you really put something this cheap on my car key? People might think we're going bankrupt." "What were you thinking?" In the next second, I received a transfer of 8 figures on my phone. I kindly closed the door behind them and went shopping with my best friend. Why make a fuss? I spend the money, and she takes care of him. If I give her a hard time, it would just show how immature I am. Chapter 1. I found cheese-flavored balloons in the car. My husband, Philip, drove it just yesterday. Although the balloons hadn't been opened, their mere presence was enough to raise suspicions. Philip and I have been married for 3 years. I had only heard about these cheese-flavored balloons on TV. I stared at the car's logo on the steering wheel in a daze, feeling disgusted. How filthy. This car was worth $5 million. What a shame. I sent him a message. "Honey, my car just caught fire. It scared me to death." Then I attached a few photos. Seconds later, Philip replied, "Pick whatever you like. I'll buy you a new one." Chapter 2. In the early hours of the morning, Philip called me. As usual, he was drunk and casually instructed me, "Anna, come pick me up." I was lying in the bathtub, sipping wine and watching a show, feeling perfectly relaxed. I tried to express my helplessness through my voice. "Did you forget? I don't have a car anymore." There was a brief pause from Philip's side. I could hear someone calling him in the background. "Mr. Jean." The voice was sweet and soft, almost dripping with charm. "Then I won't come home tonight. I'll just find a hotel and stay there." I nodded in agreement. "Send me the hotel address, and I'll have someone bring you clean clothes in the morning." "Okay." An hour later, I received a message from him. It included the hotel name and room number. Should I go and check on him? I really didn't have the time for that. I needed my beauty sleep. Whatever happens, I'll deal with it tomorrow. I thought I had given him enough time. So, the next morning, I assumed there wouldn't be anything too shocking to see, but I underestimated it. In the room, a young girl stood pitifully to the side, her eyes filled with tears. Her clothes were loosely hanging on her, far from looking neat, and Philip was sitting on the bed, looking as if he had a headache. Before I could say anything, the little girl seemed ready to defend her innocence. "Madam, we really didn't do anything. I just stayed to take care of Mr. Jean." That voice was very familiar. It was the exact same voice as in the car's dashcam recording. I glanced back and forth between them. Just as Philip furrowed his brow to speak, I interrupted him. I burst out laughing. "I haven't even said anything yet. Why are you so nervous? You've done me a favor." After that, I turned to Philip. "Pay her." Both Philip and the girl froze. It took a while before Philip, expressionless, finally spoke. "What did you say?" "The young lady took care of you all night, even if it was overtime. She deserves some compensation." The girl's expression almost faltered as her eyes reddened. "Mr. Jean." "No, I don't need it." "Why not?" I smiled. "If you don't pay her, others might think it's something she has to do. It'd be a misunderstanding." Philip looked a bit pained and spoke again, his voice hoarse. "I'll add it to her salary." "Honey, that's not right. This is personal. How can the company pay for it? If others found out, it wouldn't look good." "Anna." Philip's tone carried a hint of displeasure. I innocently turned to look at him. Did I say something wrong? In the end, Philip, gritting his teeth, pulled out a few bills from his wallet and handed them to her. "Mr. Jean." "I'm not." Philip, now a bit impatient, said. The lady said take it. "So take it." I watched as she nervously accepted the money, feeling quite pleased. "All right. You've had a long night. Take the day off to rest." The girl's lips quivered, on the verge of tears, but with my words, her expression nearly cracked. After I spoke, she didn't move, standing there, her eyes still darting toward Philip. I smiled, sat down on the bed, and patted Philip's hand. It seems only the boss's words count. Philip pressed his temples and spoke in a slightly raspy voice. The lady said, take the day off. Go. Why are you still standing here? With Mr. Jin's words, the girl finally left, looking back every few steps. Pitifully, I was still a bit angry. With that look, it's like she wanted to make sure I couldn't see through her act. Chapter 3. The young girl left, leaving just me and Philip in the room. Staying here made me feel sick. I was thinking of an excuse to leave when the phone rang. After hanging up, Philip's gaze fixed on me. You have something to do? I raised my phone and tilted my head. Looking at him, Laura invited me to go shopping. Philip nodded. I'm dizzy. I can't take you. I smiled at him. No problem. I just looked at him like that, until he pulled out a card and handed it to me. Have fun. All right. I happily accepted it and put it in my bag before leaving decisively. Before I walked out, I distinctly saw Philip's mouth open, but he said nothing. Little balloon? My best friend looked shocked. She couldn't believe that the usually upright Philip would do such a thing. She frowned. Tisk. TSK. TSK. And in your car? That's disgusting. She studied my expression, sensing something wasn't right. What's with that look on your face? I clapped my hands and laughed. Funny thing, the car caught fire by itself. Caught fire? My friend was stunned for a few seconds, then gave me a thumbs up. That's so you. Now you need a new car? I grinned happily. Of course. She grumbled, still upset on my behalf. Pick the newest and most expensive one. After laughing for a while, she grew concerned. Are you going to get divorced? Of course. She hurriedly pulled out her phone. I know a really good lawyer. I'll introduce you. I waved my hand. I don't need a lawyer right now. You don't need a lawyer? She looked at me like I was crazy. Aren't you afraid he'll chew you up and spit you out? I leisurely crossed my legs. I'm not one of those self-righteous heroines from a novel. Before the divorce, I need to stir things up, like the Monkey King, and I'll make sure he gets properly disgusted too. Chapter 4. That afternoon, I went home and repeatedly watched the memory card from the dashcam. I wondered what the point was in keeping it. It didn't serve any other purpose than proving Philip's innocence. They didn't do anything, but it still hurt me more. I have a compulsive need for control, especially in relationships. Philip and I had dated for 7 years and been married for 3. I cannot tolerate anything dirty in my marriage. I know I'm not perfect. I can accept a peaceful parting, but I cannot tolerate the presence of a mistress in my marriage. I replayed the video over and over again. I don't know what I was hoping to hear, but the more I listened, the colder my heart grew. Philip's voice, so gentle that it could drip water, felt like a knife piercing my heart. The girl's voice was delicate, with a sob that could break any man's heart. Mr. Jean, it's my fault. I shouldn't have let my imagination run wild. Philip sighed softly. In the end, he couldn't resist comforting her in a low voice. Don't cry anymore. You won't be pretty if you keep crying. He never comforted me like that. He was always so cold to me, like a block of ice. He said he loved me, but our emotional world felt like we were stuck in the polar regions every day. He always treated me with respect and restraint. Even in bed, he was never the one to take the initiative. When we first got married, being young, I couldn't see any trace of love in his eyes. So I asked him, "Do you really love me?" His expression didn't change, and his voice was very restrained. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't have married you. There's no need to doubt that. When you're young, everything is fresh and lively. Even your brain is filled with extra thoughts. So I believed him. I thought that was just his calm nature. But clearly, he could be gentle. He could be sweet. At that moment, I felt a bit crazy. All right, I admit it. I'm jealous. I just want a divorce. I became more determined in my decision. No matter how innocent they were, it didn't matter anymore. Chapter 5. On the 3rd day after deciding to divorce, I was at home browsing for a car that would make Philip feel the pinch. But before I could choose one, a car had already been delivered to my door. It was the model and color I had admired for a long time. It must have cost at least 8 figures. At the time, I thought it was a bit pricey, too luxurious for someone like me, a novice driver. The delivery staff respectfully handed me the keys with both hands. Mrs. Jean. This was ordered by Mr. Jean, and all the paperwork has been taken care of. I took the car keys, but the sparkling cartoon character almost blinded me. It was a fully encrusted Hello Kitty. I playfully waved it under the sunlight. It was incredibly shiny, but no matter how much it sparkled, it couldn't hide its cheap aura. After all, it was just covered in some plastic rhinestones, not even comparable to some fake crystals. I slowly spoke. Did Philip arrange this as well? The staff scratched his head awkwardly. This was brought over by the young lady who helped Mr. Jean with the errands today. She said Mrs. Jean would like it, so it must be on Mr. Jean's behalf. He then flattered. Mr. Jean is really thoughtful, remembering even your small preferences. How enviable! A young lady? How interesting. This little girl had just added a very visible fly in the ointment to my grand meal. It seemed she could hardly hold back anymore. After the car delivery personnel left, I took out the documents from the folder. The car was registered under my name. An hour later, I drove the car to the office. Outside Philip's office, I saw the same young lady from the hotel. Her gaze was fixed on the car keys in my hand. I smiled and greeted her. So, you're Philip's new secretary. No wonder I haven't seen you before. As soon as I spoke, she had no choice but to stand up. Hello, Mrs. Jean. I'm Fernanda. I patted her shoulder. It must be tough working for Philip. At the mention of Philip, the young lady beamed with energy. It's an honor to work for Mr. Jean. I gave her a knowing smile. All right. I'm going in to see Philip. Philip was not surprised by my visit. He even had a polite smile ready on his face. It was as if he knew I would come. As if he also knew how my car suddenly caught fire. After all, his car delivery was a bit too fast. So fast that it made me think he felt guilty. I dangled the car keys in front of him. Thanks for the new car. And for the adorable Hello Kitty. What? Feigning surprise, I said. The fully encrusted doll on the keychain. Wasn't it your idea? Philip's eyebrows furrowed, but he quickly relaxed. As long as you like it. I curled my lips meaningfully. However, you've spent millions on the car, yet you use this junk to fool me? I chuckled softly, teasing, if I go out with this, people will say Mrs. Jean is flaunting a fake car key. What? Philip furrowed his brow, clearly confused. I moved the doll closer to him. You really put something this cheap on my car key? What were you thinking? Philip's expression turned slightly awkward, and he cleared his throat. The next second, I received an 8-figure bank transfer on my phone. Philip's expression became completely composed when he looked at me again. Sorry, I didn't realize. Go replace it with something you like. 8 figures really is a cure-all. It instantly put me in a great mood. I put away my phone and changed the topic. By the way, when did you switch secretaries? What happened to Elias? His previous secretary was a man, a very reliable one. Philip rubbed his nose. Elias was transferred to a branch office. This new one was just hired. Seeing his increasing fidgeting, I felt a chill in my heart. In the end, I forced a smile and casually said, "Oh, I see." Then I asked, "Is this girl any good?" I watched as Philip slowly clenched his fist. The answer no longer mattered. I turned and walked out, waving goodbye. I'm leaving, going to visit Mom. Chapter 6. I went to visit Philip's mother. I don't have a mother, just a father. I was considered the apple of my father's eye. But even so, that didn't stop him from extending the expiration date of his love. He cheated with a subordinate. And my mother, full of pride, jumped off a building. I loved them both equally, and I hated them equally. It's a complicated emotion. Looking back now, I think my mother was foolish. She abandoned even her daughter for the sake of her pride. Is love that important? It's great if you have it, but it can be even better if you don't. She gave up her life for a man. Is that pride? Did she think it would make someone feel guilty for life? Little did she know that just after her burial, my father quickly resumed his grieving by entertaining women. A wealthy, heartbroken man, how could he not be in demand? My mother was utterly foolish. When I walked in, Philip's mother immediately served a bowl of soup. Then, pointing at it, she urged me to drink it quickly. I knew what it was. It was one of those fertility remedies passed down among wealthy wives. In the past, no matter how reluctant I was, I still cared about Philip's reputation. But today, I wasn't there to save face for anyone. The look of reluctance on my face didn't escape her notice. "Anna, what's wrong?" she cautiously asked. "Did you and Philip have a fight?" I shook my head and clung to her arm. "No." "Then what's going on? Why won't you drink the soup?" Seeing my silence, she furrowed her brows and asked, "Don't tell me you two don't plan to have children?" I forced a few tears to fall. "Mom, I've tried, but..." I paused at the perfect moment, allowing her imagination to run wild. Her lips trembled slightly. What do you mean?" With a face full of grievance, I continued. "The doctor said it's most likely." Philip's mother exploded instantly. "Don't talk nonsense." I pitifully held her hand. "Mom, I want to have children too, but I just can't." Philip's mother scrutinized my face for a few moments before sinking into defeat. "This, Philip himself. I don't dare tell him. Men need their pride. I can only say it's probably my issue." Hearing this, Philip's mother's expression softened. She patted my hand. "You've been through a lot." When I left the Jean family's mansion, I had an exquisite pair of jade bracelets in hand. They gleamed luxuriously in the sunlight. When Philip's mother took them out, she was clearly pained and made sure to emphasize that Philip's father had spent millions at an auction to acquire them. "Philip's busy with work. Be more understanding." "Of course. No problem. As long as there's money, I can tolerate just about anything." I wasn't falsely accusing Philip. We hadn't had kids in years of marriage, and it was indeed his idea, so I wasn't wronging him. As for his reasons, who cares? Wearing these $1,000,000 bracelets, I was feeling quite smug. I called my best friend. "Let's meet. We need to talk about what you mentioned last time." Chapter 7. A long time ago, my best friend gossiped with me about the Jean family's past, about the Jean family's illegitimate child. At the time, I wasn't interested, but now, I wanted to know more. My friend looked smug. "Show me some respect if you want to know." I respectfully handed her the diamond bracelet she had wanted for so long. Her eyes lit up, and she began gossiping nonstop. Philip's father had more than one woman outside, but only one had a child. My dad said that child is even older than Philip. These things run in the family, but to keep the family together, Philip's father gave enough money to send the child abroad and forbid them from returning. It's been so many years, and he's still keeping it under control. I listened to her go on as if she were telling a story, feeling a bit skeptical. "Is this all true? Don't trick me." My friend crossed her arms and looked confident. "What's my dad's relationship with Philip's father?" "They've been inseparable since childhood." I still wasn't convinced. "Then why did he tell you such a big secret, knowing you can't keep your mouth shut and that you're close to me?" She stuck out her tongue. "It's because of you. I got him drunk and made him spill." All right. I believed her. I turned around and hired a private detective. "I just need the information and contact details. Don't alert anyone." Chapter 8. Philip came back looking exhausted that evening. He sat on the couch and called me. "I'm going abroad for a few days. Can you pack my luggage?" I responded as usual. "Sure." Then I asked, "Are you going alone? Is the driver picking you up, or should I take you to the airport?" He shook his head. Then, as if he remembered something, selectively answered my question. "Yeah, just trouble yourself to take me to the airport early in the morning." In the middle of the night, Philip was asleep, but I couldn't sleep. I went to the kitchen for water and passed by the living room. I saw Philip's suitcase by the entrance and suddenly felt the urge to open Pandora's box. I had packed it, but he had taken it out himself at the end. It wouldn't hurt to double-check for him. I gently opened the suitcase. Then, in the pocket of one of his pants, I found the little balloon again. I couldn't describe how I felt. I didn't sleep a wink that night, but the next morning, I still got up early and made breakfast. Then, with dark circles under my eyes, I drove Philip to the airport. As I expected, Fernanda was with him. When I saw Fernanda get out of his car, I almost couldn't keep my expression in check. Fernanda cheerfully jumped out of the car, pulling a small pink Hello Kitty suitcase. She wasn't as reserved as the other day, but rather much more relaxed. She had the air of a victor showing off. "Sorry, ma'am. The driver was supposed to pick up Mr. Jean, but my place is too far, and I love to sleep in. I was afraid I'd miss the flight and delay the trip. So Mr. Jin's driver picked me up instead. Thank you for getting up early to bring Mr. Jean here." Every word was an explanation, but every word was also showing off. I quietly watched her performance. Philip, on the other hand, started to get a bit impatient. "Go check in." Her chatterbox of a mouth suddenly closed. She bit her lip, looking all sweet and demure. Really adorable. Okay. The girl left, and Philip tightened his grip on my hand. He seemed to be hesitating about something. Sure enough, he spoke. "Why don't you come with me?" I quietly studied him for 2 seconds, then burst out laughing. "What are you saying? You've never taken me on a business trip before." In a corner not too far away, I saw Fernanda. I gave Philip a gentle push. "All right, go on. The young lady is waiting for you." Philip frowned slightly, showing rare irritation, and began to explain. "It's not just her and me. The team already went ahead." I grew curious. He hadn't explained even when we were in a hotel room together. So why was he explaining now? Philip's attempts to reassure me had an air of trying too hard. "You've never been abroad with me. Let's go together." I still refused. Philip had no choice. He walked away, looking back at me with every step. But I only looked back once and saw Fernanda's little hand tugging at his sleeve. Her little mouth was still chattering about something. Philip wanted me to stop everything from happening, but I didn't want to anymore. I even hoped things would move faster between them. I could hardly wait. Chapter 9. Philip had been on a business trip for 5 days. Every night, I received a video call from him. It was morning where he was, but it was already dark here. "I know you like to sleep in, so this is the only time I can call you," he said. He seemed stubbornly determined to prove something, and all I could do was play along, pretending to be the loving wife. I knew exactly why he was there. He was signing a collaboration deal with a foreign company. It was important, so he went personally. We had hosted the head of this company together when he visited our country. During that dinner, Philip showed just how much of a gentleman he could be, doting on me as his wife. I teased him afterward, asking why he was acting so out of character. Was he drunk? Pinching the bridge of his nose, he admitted, "Mr. Weiss values the importance of a loving marriage." I was a little upset at the time, raising my eyebrows to question him. Was it all an act? Couldn't you at least fool me a bit? Do these outward gestures really matter? He didn't wait for my answer and instead turned around to take a shower. At that moment, I wanted to grab him by the collar and tell him that the outward displays of love do matter. But I didn't. I thought people had their own ways of loving. Everyone expresses love differently. Looking back now, I realize how stupid I was. While he was overseas, the news here was relentless. The Jean Corporation was enjoying a wave of publicity. At the same time, the media was hyping up the romantic love between Philip and his wife. Romantic? More like a pile of crap. I muted all the related notifications. Only then could I find some peace. Things were quiet for a few days, until the day before Philip returned. He messaged me, asking me to pick him up at the airport. I couldn't help but laugh. In 3 years, he had never been this clingy. Something was definitely off, but I still went. After all, appearances had to be maintained. Wearing sunglasses, I stood among the crowd of reporters at the arrival gate, waiting for Philip to emerge. Beside him was Fernanda, smiling like a blooming flower. I couldn't help but think how great it is to be young. Even after several days of intense work abroad, she still radiated like a sunflower. Yeah, I'd like her too if I were him. I used to be like that too. But Philip, the old refrigerator, had frozen me solid, just as I was lost in thought. He walked up to me. My empty hands might have made him feel a bit awkward. He probably expected a bouquet or something. Before the reporters could swarm, Fernanda pulled a rose out of her bag and handed it to me with a cheerful smile. Mrs. Jean must have been so excited that she forgot to buy flowers. So here's one I'll lend you. It's a specially cultivated rose from the U.S. And Mr. Jean bought the only one. I didn't take it. As she lowered her head, the scarf around her neck slipped, revealing dark red marks on her pale skin. She hurriedly adjusted it, awkwardly smiling at me with an apologetic expression. But I saw the pride in her eyes. I simply curled my lips and looked up at Philip. Do you need this? Philip didn't spare Fernanda a glance. He wrapped his arm around my shoulder and, for the first time in front of the media, smiled gently. Your presence is the best gift you could give me. As he spoke, he pulled a small box from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. A gift. With the reporters egging him on, he opened the box, revealing a pink diamond ring inside. This ring symbolizes our one-of-a-kind love. He took my hand, only to find that the wedding ring that should have been on my ring finger had left only a faint mark. He looked up at me in surprise, but I kept smiling brightly. I knew what he wanted to ask, but the cameras were all on us. He quickly slipped the luxurious pink diamond onto my finger. A reporter asked, Mr. Jean, do you have anything to say about the success of this deal? Holding my hand, he faced the camera with a look of deep affection. I want to thank my wife for her support and understanding. I wanted to vomit. No, I wasn't pregnant. It was pure disgust. Chapter 10. Philip didn't mention the ring again after he came home, but when I put the pink diamond ring away, he started to show some dissatisfaction as he noticed my bare hand. You used to never take off your ring. Why don't you wear it anymore? I used to wear the ring because of love. Now I don't wear it because there's no love left. But I found a good excuse to soothe him. I've been taking pottery classes lately, and it would be such a shame if the ring got dirty or lost. I pouted playfully. The teacher won't even dare touch my hands if I'm wearing the ring. Philip raised an eyebrow slightly, clearly a bit suspicious. Since when were you interested in pottery? I looked up at him. I've always liked it. Just recently decided to give it a try, shaping everything I like with my own hands. It's an interesting thing to do. I'm thinking of combining it with my profession and opening a studio. I majored in music in college and joined an orchestra after graduation, but I didn't like the orchestral life. I quit after getting married. Since then, I've just pursued things I enjoy while making some pocket money on the side. With Philip and my father backing me, I've made quite a bit. But now, I realize that wasn't a long-term plan. In the past, whenever I mentioned starting my own business, Philip would always come up with various reasons to persuade me, telling me how wonderful it was to stay home and enjoy my freedom. Now I see this man didn't love me. He was clearly manipulating me. But today, surprisingly, he agreed right away. Go check out some places, and leave the rest to me. I looked at him, smiling in satisfaction. Whatever he was hiding in his swift agreement, I couldn't tell. A week later, Philip bought the shop I had picked out. When the deed was handed to me, I opened it, and my name was on it. Nice. This shop location was worth at least tens of millions. Chapter 11. Fernanda didn't disappoint me. A month after returning from abroad, she came to find me. Her face was full of excitement, as if her lover wasn't my husband. It was like I was her mother, given the way she beamed as she shared her pregnancy news with me. Mrs. Jean, I'm 1 month pregnant. I raised an eyebrow, almost laughing out loud. Miss Sue, I think you may have picked the wrong person to share this with. Fernanda's face was full of stubbornness. This is Mr. Jin's child. And so? I chuckled. It's not my child. Why are you telling me? Mrs. Jean, Mr. Jean and I. She didn't even finish before I cut her off. Whatever you and Mr. Jean have doesn't concern me. You're welcome to announce your thrilling news of being a mistress and getting pregnant out of wedlock to the world. But I'm not interested. I grabbed my bag and turned to leave. But Fernanda, clearly unsatisfied, called after me. He said he never loved you. What's the point of being Mrs. Jean? He gives me roses. Do you get any? I turned back, incredulous. It's autumn already, and you're acting like spring's first blossom? He never loved me, and he only loves you. Are you happy now? I crossed my arms. Young lady, You may have the roses, but the house is mine. The diamond ring is mine. I looked at her with utter disdain. As for those roses, they're part of our shared marital assets. If I feel generous enough to let some fall through my fingers, you should be grateful. If I'm not happy, I can make you give them back. The smile on my lips grew wider. Even if it's just a single rose. I grabbed my bag and left. At the same time, I ended the call I had secretly kept on with Philip. I didn't go home but went straight to my newly purchased house. 1 month was enough time to set it up just the way I liked it. That night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Philip had probably already seen the divorce papers I left on his desk. The terms weren't equal. What I wanted was much more than what he expected. Money! It's money! Who doesn't like it? The other evidence wasn't important. I just sent him a recording of my conversation with Fernanda from earlier today. If you don't want this to end peacefully, we can make it a public spectacle. No one may care that a man has cheated, but his business partners certainly would. If the news breaks and things fall apart, I imagine the Jean family's heir might have to be replaced. Chapter 12. Philip still managed to find my new home in the middle of the night. I got up and checked the surveillance at the door. Finding it somewhat amusing, through the monitor, I saw him standing there from 2 a.m. until 10 in the morning, when the sun was already high. I leaned against the door and looked at him. Mr. Jean, aren't you tired? Philip hadn't slept all night, and the stubble on his chin had grown wild. He looked like a dirty Pekingese dog. It had only been 1 night, but it felt like a long time. His voice was hoarse as he struggled to speak. There's nothing between her and me. I heard the biggest joke of the century. Then, is her child mine? Philip rubbed his hair in frustration. I don't know whose it is, but it's not mine. I pulled out my phone and enlarged the photo in front of him. So, you're saying the thing in your suitcase is something I, the dutiful wife, packed for you? Philip stared at the photo, tightly pressing his lips together. I did take it, but I didn't do anything. I laughed so hard I squatted down. It took a while for me to catch my breath. I looked up at him. Don't you think what you just said is ridiculous? I admit I have a sense of novelty with her, but I've never done anything to betray you. I stood up quickly and slapped him across the face. Seeing his face tilted from the slap triggered my compulsiveness. I raised my other hand and slapped him again. Now, his cheeks were perfectly symmetrical. 2 bright red handprints. Much better. In 3 years of marriage, 10 years of knowing each other, I had never hit him before. These 2 slaps were enough to settle it. I won't sign the divorce papers. Anna, I've always loved you. What she gave me was just a sense of novelty. I swear, I intended for us to part peacefully. But his words made me lose all patience. She's fresh? What? Am I not fresh anymore? Am I some dried up mummy? Chapter 13. Philip refused to divorce. I had already expected that. Anna, I love you. What will it take for you to believe me? You love me, right? Philip's eyes were bloodshot, looking even more miserable than I, the one who had been betrayed. I'm willing to give you anything, as long as you don't divorce me. Anything? I chuckled. Once the water drained from my head, I was no saint. All right. Show me your sincerity. In the following week, lawyers came one after another with agreements for me to sign. This is the gift deed for 2 villas on Lijiang Road. Once you sign, we'll handle the rest. This is the deed for 19 shops, including those in the Yunding building. One after another, he was showing me his sincerity. I signed without hesitation. Since he was offering, I accepted everything. After everything was settled, I brought the divorce papers to Philip once again. Philip had lost weight. But what did that have to do with me? Philip frowned at me. Anna, I won't sign. After I got home, I received a call from my dad. On the other end, he seemed to be reasoning with me, but every word stabbed at my heart. Anna, Philip said he didn't do anything. Why can't you just let it go? Isn't it that daddy spoiled you too much? Is divorce something you can just throw around like that? I let out a cold laugh. They were all the same, 2 outsiders. It seemed like they spoiled me to the core, but how did they really treat me behind closed doors? Spoiling me was just their twisted way of compensating me. One of them cheated and caused my mom's death, so they raised me like a delicate flower. The other swore he didn't cheat, yet he made an unusual number of compensatory gestures. I angrily threw my phone. You're the ones who wronged me, not the other way around. Chapter 14. Philip still refused to sign the papers, but he hadn't tried to contact me again. From what I knew, things had already turned into a complete mess at his house. Philip's father was an old-fashioned man. He believed every rumor, and upon hearing that Philip might not be capable, he panicked, fearing that the Jean family would have no heir. So, he brazenly called his illegitimate son back from abroad, ready to welcome him into the family. Philip's mother had been proud her entire life, always boasting about her happy and perfect marriage. Only at the end did she find out that her husband had fathered a child before they were even married. Naturally, she couldn't accept it, and the house turned into a war zone. Philip was probably feeling like his head was about to explode. The next time we met was a month later. He looked years older. Gone was the proud and stern man he used to be. Instead, he handed me a paternity test. For the first time in 10 years, he spoke to me with patience, his voice soft and humble. That's not my child. Nothing happened between us. I was drunk that night overseas, but I remember clearly that I held back. We didn't go all the way. She couldn't accept it, so she found someone else to get pregnant. I didn't betray you. I smiled, feeling a sense of relief. I believe you. A glimmer of hope seemed to light up in Philip's eyes, but it quickly faded with my next words. But we can't go back. I've never seen you as gentle as you were with her. Maybe I'm just jealous. You've already had someone else in your mind, so I don't want you anymore. I slid the divorce papers in front of him. Let's end this peacefully. Philip hesitated for a few seconds before picking up the pen and signing without hesitation. I asked him, "Aren't you going to look over the terms? Aren't you afraid I might demand too much?" Philip shook his head. Everything I have, I'm willing to give you. I only regret that I wanted a few more years of just the two of us and didn't ask for a child right after we got married. If we had a child, would we still have ended up here? I looked at the man in front of me, unsure of what I felt. Even now, he hadn't reflected on himself. He only regretted not having a child to tie me down. After a long pause, I slowly spoke. I'm glad we didn't have a child, because what's bound to go wrong will go wrong, and there's no such thing as if. Chapter 15. The day we got our divorce papers, Philip was dressed in all black, just like the day we first met. I knew that the Jean Corporation had gone through a lot of changes recently, and he was probably having a hard time, but none of that was my concern anymore. He brought it upon himself. To me, it was nothing more than gossip. Holding the dark red divorce certificate in my hand, I waved goodbye to him. Just like birds of the mountains and fish of the sea, our paths would never cross again. Side story, Philip. The first time I saw Anna, her radiant smile was like a beam of light, piercing straight into my heart. She smiled mischievously. You're so handsome. Can you be my boyfriend? I turned her down, but she didn't seem upset. She continued to follow me every day, with that bright, cheerful smile. One day, after class, I didn't see her usual lively figure, and to my surprise, I felt a bit disappointed. I called her. Where are you? She said she had been in an accident, so I rushed to the hospital after getting the address. When I got there, I realized she had just fallen off her bike. At that moment, I realized how much I cared about her. I only needed to hear Anna's phone number once to remember it. Anna played the victim, holding up her scraped hand. It hurt so much. I pursed my lips, walked over, and sat beside her. What should we do then? Her eyes sparkled mischievously. Blow on it, and it won't hurt anymore. Even though I knew she was pretending, I bent down and blew on her hand. Later, we got married. I was busy managing the company and didn't let her do anything. I just wanted her to be happy. One day, I noticed her smile was gone. I thought it was because she had grown up. It wasn't until our divorce that I realized she had never been happy. The things I thought were the best for her were never what she truly wanted. When Fernanda came for her interview, I thought I'd met another version of Anna. I kept her around, subconsciously treating her differently from others. I thought I was just being kind to a young woman, but she confessed her love for me in the car. It was only then I realized I had crossed a line. But faced with her teary eyes, I couldn't bring myself to say anything harsh. I simply told her that our relationship was purely professional. She cried, and I thought she understood. But over time, I realized she had gone too far. She did a lot of things behind the scenes, but Anna didn't seem to care. I thought Anna had matured. I tried to make up for it, but no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. Anna became more obedient, but also more distant. It wasn't until my father brought back my so-called brother from abroad that I finally understood. Anna had made up her mind to leave me from the start. She had drifted further away from me, all while I mistook it for maturity. I used to watch my father parade one woman after another outside, and I hated him for it. But in the end, I turned out to be even worse. David was 2 years older than me. I thought he lived a carefree life abroad with no ambition. But when he humbly bowed his head in front of me, his eyes were full of disdain. Brother, I'll be learning from you from now on. I never admit defeat. But in the end, I lost. It doesn't matter anymore. After all, I've given all my assets to Anna. I signed the papers without hesitation and divorced Anna. My father called me a fool, but if I had let all that fall into someone else's hands, that would have been truly foolish.